Hello and welcome to the Glasgow Motorway Archive podcast. I'm John Hassel, and as always I am joined by Stuart Baird. How are you, Stuart?
I am fine, John. How are you?
I'm wonderful. It's really hot today in here, isn't it?
Yes, it's been a warm couple of days and we are suffering a wee bit here in the Glasgow Motorway Archive headquarters, but hopefully we won't melt away while we're recording this. And I am delighted to say that you're joining us for a very special podcast. We are celebrating the 50th anniversary of the completion of the Erskine Bridge.
Yes, I have waited long for this day.
Yes.
Listeners of the podcast, people who've looked at the website and social media know that me, John Hassel, I am a big fan of this bridge.
Yes.
And Stuart, you have had some less favourable things to say about the bridge over the years, so this is going to be a particularly painful episode for you.
Yes, I'm a bit of a convert, it has to be said. I come round to the idea of Erskine Bridge, and you know what, we couldn't let the 50th anniversary go by without some kind of celebration. And of course, in people viewing our social media channels and the like, we'll be seeing all the various things that have been going out on there. So yeah, it's good. I think people will like it. I think people have a regard for the Erskine Bridge they maybe don't about other bridges. It probably is a bridge that people use when they're going somewhere nice. So they're going on holiday, they're going out for the day.
It's like when we said when we met Doogie Vipond on that television show, was at Landward, and I said it's the expressway to the holiday.
That's right.
You know, and a line that probably lives on in infamy now. But no, it's great to be talking about this. And you've just mentioned, Stuart, about social media. Go and have a look at Facebook after the podcast. Some of the pictures and on Twitter of inside the Erskine Bridge and also in the service tunnel and stuff. Some of the pictures are fantastic.
Oh, they are. And of course, you must pick up a copy of our booklet, our celebratory booklet for the anniversary, in a similar style to Kingston that we released last year. So we've done another booklet. It's available on the website. Go to the online store. The booklet's free, but there is a postage charge of £1.50. So if you pay that, you'll get a nice shiny booklet sent to you within
physical copy.
Yeah, physical copy within a couple of weeks. And very special, we have run another line of badges for Erskine's 50th, and they're highly limited. There's not a lot of them.
Are you going to make me pay for one like you did with Kingston?
Yes, absolutely. They are extremely limited in number. So if you want to go on and pre-order a badge, they'll be with us in a few weeks. So you can put a pre-order in, it'll get shipped out to you as soon as they arrive. So go on the store, have a look at that. If you bought a Kingston one last year, you'll know the quality was superb. They come in a nice wee backing card and a nice wee cellophane wrapper.
Which you must never remove, of course.
Never.
It's like a comic.
Yep. Exactly. So, definitely pick one of those up as well. You'll get them on there. And of course, the new web article is now live on the website as well. And a raft of new photographs that we've unearthed. And thanks to everyone who's helped us with that. Western Bartonshire Council Arts and Heritage in particular, a special mention to them. And the guys at Maybe, formerly Fairfield Maybe, who actually built the bridge. They've helped us locate the Erskine Bridge archive photos as well. So very many thanks.
Massive treasure trove of stuff that's come through from these guys. And it's been good to share it.
Historic Environment Scotland, I should say as well, who we have licensed some of their images from as well. So it's all come together very nicely.
It has, indeed. And for many years, we hadn't quite given it justice on the website, did we? It was all a bit of a holding page. And I mean, there were loads of other things we're working on, but this is a good opportunity to do that.
You're absolutely right. The anniversary was as good an excuse as any to actually do something a bit more deserving of such a major bridge and crossing of the River Clyde.
Absolutely. Speaking of deserving, it's only fair to mention our sponsors at this time because they are linked in some ways with some anniversaries that have happened and also for the Erskine Bridge.
That's right, we really should thank our supporters, who without them we wouldn't be recording podcasts as often as we are or putting out all that stuff on social media. Should say thanks to Eastford Excavations and Andy and the team there who have supported us for just about a year now. Andy's guys, you mentioned the other day when we were talking about the 10th anniversary of the M74 completion project, that Andy's guys were actually involved in the signage works on the M74 project. So
they're still standing.
Yes.
So well done.
And no slippage or no drooping of those signs, like you see elsewhere where they start to subside or settle and the sign pulls itself down. M74 hasn't had that. So Andy and your guys, well done. Well done. You show them how it's done. and our other supporter, more recent supporter, Highway Barrier Solutions Scotland, HBS Scotland. You may see them. They do a lot of traffic management. They do a lot of barrier works all across Scotland. Thanks to Nigel and the team there for their help. And Nigel and his team have a specific connection to Erskine Bridge. They've done a few major schemes out there, including the upgrade of the parapets and the main barrier system on the bridge as well.
Yep. Absolutely.
So thank you to all of you. And if anybody else wants to support us or sponsor anything we're doing, please do get in touch. We're always happy to talk to people about that.
Great. Yes, absolutely.
All right.
So we're going to have to get into the guts of this now. So there's quite a few things to cover, but a return to old form. We've got some questions here with this paper sitting on my lap. I'm looking forward to going through these.
Yeah, so it's one of these old style podcasts where I talk for like 40 minutes about all the facts and figures, and then
I get comfortable.
Yeah, and you chip in now and again with a wee question or
I thought it was only fair
points.
that you headed up a lot of the research and done the talking about Erskine, because you never liked it, and I thought this was a good way to convert you. Because otherwise I'd just be sitting here talking at you. Yeah. Like I've done with some of the other roads that I'm evangelical about. Yeah. So
I make no secret of the fact that I was not an Erskine fan.
Where did this come from?
I think it was because it was not so much to do with its functionality so much as the fact that I was a fan more of Kingston and the Clyde Tunnel. To me, Kingston was the absolute wonder. Yeah, of the Glasgow Motorway system,
of river crossings for
exactly. And Erskine was kind of like just this bridge that I would go across whenever I was going somewhere and I wanted to avoid the Clyde Tunnel or Great Western Road. And I remember paying the tolls going across. I was never particularly against the tolls or anything like that. I just, for some reason, just never held it in much regard. I thought, the thing that I now appreciate about it was actually the thing that I didn't enjoy much about it years ago. It was so slender in design and its the aesthetic that it really, there was nothing much to it. And as a younger guy interested in big beefy bridges like Kingston, it's really in your face. Oh, that's wonderful. Looking at Erskine, you're like, well, there's nothing to it. But I appreciate that more now that I've spent more time on bridges and learned about bridges and
with
worked
your
with
work.
Bridges. Yes.
Yeah, I can get that. I mean, if you, in some ways, you could look at Erskine almost like just a big flyover.
It's
in some ways,
it's a wondrous design.
Yeah,
a very efficient form of construction, very cheap to build. And that's why
that's what we want in engineering.
Yeah, very slender appearance. And you know what? There was people involved in it who'd been involved in other schemes, and I'm going to tell you all about that as well. So I think we'll just start at the beginning.
Okay.
Basically,
I think that's best now. Now that you've justified your position on why you were like that.
Absolutely. I agree. So, okay. So at Erskine, which at that time was a small village, now a much larger town, was one of the later new towns that came along, and Old Kilpatrick. Across the north side of the river. There had always been a ferry service, or there had been for a few hundred years. Yeah. Okay.
Or a queuing service for a ferry.
Yeah, exactly. So in the later years of the operation of the ferry, and certainly even through the 1930s, when traffic growth had spiralled and had gone through the roof, the public had started to complain about the reliability of the ferry service. Now we have to remember that in the 1930s, if you were crossing the river there were no bridges out with or outside Glasgow city centre. So you had to use a ferry to cross. No Clyde Tunnel, no bridges at Clyde Arc or Kingston or any of these places. So you had to use the ferry. And as traffic growth increased, so did the unreliability of the service. In that, as you say, there were a lot of queues, particularly in the busy summer months when people would be heading for the Highlands. Yeah. And at that point, there was no real wonderful road network that people could use to avoid ferries or anything like that. I mean, Great Western Road, would have been an option for some people, but very urban in nature at that time. Not a lot of dual carriageway in place in the 30s at that point either. A lot of that came much later. So, people started to say, no, hang on, this is not good enough. And the local authorities, Dumbartonshire County on the north and Renfrewshire County on the south, started to say, right, hang on, we really need a bridge here. But of course, it was going to be difficult for a bridge because Glasgow being the heart of shipping and shipbuilding,
that you need something. I mean, I think the River Clyde's very wide there. It's something becoming an estuary at that point. That you're going to need something of a massive span. Yeah, or you're going to need a tunnel.
Yeah, exactly. So we couldn't have put something in there like Tay Bridge, for example, Tay Road Bridge. It was going to have to be something that was high level and had a real wide main span in the middle to cross that estuary. Okay. So they knew that it was going to be technically challenging and was probably going to cost a lot of money. Okay. So they had this aspiration, let's do this. Now, as with a lot of projects in Glasgow that we've discussed, the Second World War had a huge impact on progress on Scotland's upgrading of its roads. And it was really the 1950s before the project came back. Okay. And in 1955, they actively had discussions about what can we do here, And eventually they decided to form a joint committee, for the construction of a bridge, and they started looking into various studies. Now, the joint committee itself was actually formed in 1963. Okay, so quite late on. So they'd had some discussions from the 50s through. So kind of like the Glasgow plans.
So nothing really got kind of officially put to paper until the early 60s. It was just kind of mooted about.
Some sketches, wee discussions here and there, articles in the in the paper saying, yeah, we really need to do this, we're going to do this, that kind of thing, but no progress. Very much like the Glasgow Inner Ring Road.
Yeah, okay. And was it just spoke about in a crossing in this context?
Yes. Yeah. Right. Yep, definitely. So in 1963, they finally formed this joint committee between the two councils, and they commissioned aerial surveys and trial boreholes and traffic studies and various other, feasibility and viability studies to see, would the bridge work? Would it be used? Crucially, is it all going to be used by one or two people a day going across the river? Can we actually link it in with the wider road plans that we had? Because by 1963, the Scottish Office knew that they were going to have this new network of motorways and dual carriageways across the central belt. Could they make it all fit in and tie in with that? Would it then act almost as a bypass of Glasgow for traffic heading north? All these things all started to fall into place.
Yeah.
Okay. And things really moved forward in December 1963 when the Joint Committee decided to appoint Freeman Fox and Partners to develop a study and a design for the bridge.
And they done fourth.
Yes.
Freeman Fox.
Yeah.
So these guys have got some experience with this sort of thing.
And they were involved in other box girder, cable-stayed bridges elsewhere in the world at this time. And some of the design team that they had, some of the guys who were involved were actually at the forefront of design of trapezoidal box girders and
very cutting edge for that.
Because cutting edge.
I mean, cable stay is now something we see as as a modern.
Well, that's the thing. Cable-stayed bridges have been on the go since the 17th century. But it was only when we get into the Victorian era that it started to get used more widely. They then kind of fell out of favour for suspension bridges for the wider estuaries for a time. But as we started to move through the 20th century and as technology moved on and material technology moved on crucially, and you could get longer span steel and stuff like that, they were actually able to start considering cable-stayed bridges as a viable option for some of the wider estuaries.
Well, I've learned something there. I didn't think they went back that far. And then they've had like a revival. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's right. So Freeman Fox go away and start looking into their studies. And in 1964, they actually present their initial findings to the Joint Committee. And it's pretty obvious at that point that, this is going to be a rather large project, easily on a scale of what was intended in the Glasgow Inner Ring Road. In terms of the amount of money that was required, they estimated something like £10 million. To put that in context, that's like, that's between 150, 200 million pounds today. So it's a lot of money. And the local authorities simply didn't have that. Yeah. So as the scope of the project became clear, they opened discussions with the Scottish Development Department through the Scottish Office, who eventually agreed that they would take on responsibility for the delivery of the project. It was felt that the feasibility had justified the need for the project enough. Not only that, in the interim period, there had been a lot of development of new industry in the Linwood area. The motor car industry had moved in there, and there was other factories that were coming up. And it was felt that some of the skilled labour that was on the north side of the river, in the Dumbarton area, and where some of the industry there had started to decline,
right,
it was almost seen as a way of enabling those people to get across the river.
So getting that workforce, which might have been quite skilled.
Basically mobilising their workforce.
So that was a justification.
Yeah.
Now, I know we haven't scripted for this, we don't tend to script, but a colleague came out and hit me with something a little bit left field about Erskine a while ago.
Yeah.
And about another reason for the bridge being there was potential access to military facilities or planned military facilities.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that? Any truth in that?
Well,
or is it just a convenient byproduct?
Well, Faz Lane was very much under development at that time.
Yeah.
Might that have been part of the thinking? Very possibly. But was that ever put in paper? No.
I've never seen it mentioned, and it just seemed to be maybe it's one of these myths, or maybe it's just it was a given, and they were like, oh well, that's a convenient byproduct.
It offered other opportunities as well, because we know that they had plans for bringing new water mains and the like, and gas mains across the river into the Renfrewshire area for Paisley. Right. And putting the bridge there actually allowed them to connect these utilities to the design for the bridge.
You could just sling it under the deck.
Yeah, exactly. And it saved them having to bore under the river, and and it made it easier to maintain it, down the line. So it provided opportunities for a variety of things. And I think that was one of the things that even early on they decided that they were going to include, footways and cycleways. They didn't want to restrict it just to almost as a motorway crossing, for traffic only. It was felt that it could become a corridor that was used by pedestrians going, making local trips. I guess they had looked at the studies that they had done and they saw that on the ferry there must be people who were making regular journeys on foot.
Again, looking at your car ownership back then and stuff like that. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And it's a good way of kind of, it's a bit of forward planning they had with that as well, because nowadays when we look at some of the crossing like that, Yoka, the new Yoka crossing is very much a thing where it is geared almost towards NMUs and public transport and things like that, putting these footpaths on it, I suppose, in just the same way as Forth. As you say, people wanted to do that. Yeah. It's a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was a good idea. And it was at that very optimistic time where we were modernising our transport infrastructure across the country.
And it was catering to pedestrians, cyclists.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to give you some facts and figures about the design. Okay. And it is a bit scripted, so I'm going to do what you often do, and I'm going to read from some pages that we've got prepared
of course.
here.
Okay.
Because I think people will appreciate some of the facts and figures. So basically the design that they came up with was for a monocable stayed box girder bridge with a main span of 1,000 feet, which is 300 metres, okay, and principal side spans of 360 feet, which is just over 100 metres, okay. In all, there are 15 spans, and the total length of the bridge is 4,334 feet, which equates to 1,300 metres, or 1.3 kilometres. Okay, it has been designed to withstand winds of 130 miles an hour, although it will close to traffic at much lower wind speeds than that for obvious reasons. I don't think anybody would fancy crossing the bridge in 130 mile an hour winds.
No.
Okay, now, so there are 14 reinforced concrete supports, very slender, towering up to 50 metres in some cases. They were designed specifically for the project by Dr. W.A. Fairhurst, William Fairhurst. Now, his partnership company, Fairhurst and Partners, were involved in the design of the Tay Road Bridge and the Kingston Bridge.
Yes.
So Fairhurst are well known, so Fairhurst have this connection. So it was basically felt, the Scottish Office felt that Fairhurst were best placed to design the piers and foundations because they had that expertise. Fairhurst was renowned for his slender,
elliptical, and are those features apparent on the piers?
Yes,
on
very much so.
And that helps with the wind loading, doesn't it? That's
exactly
the idea for that.
So the Scottish Office felt, well, hang on, okay guys, you might be good with the steel work here and the box girder and the cables, but let's not make things difficult for ourselves. Let's bring in a consultant who knows about this sort of thing. So Fairhurst was closely involved. He himself, as I say, was closely involved in the design of these 14 slender supports. Okay, let's give you some more facts and figures here. So on the North Bank, the piers are founded in clusters of piles, some of which are up to 180 feet long. And the total length of piles actually used in the contract was 43,000 feet. Now, I haven't calculated what that is in metres, but roughly if you divide it by 3, you'll get that. So if anybody wants to do that on a calculator. So the design basically allowed for 2 carriageways, 2 24-foot carriageways, so 2 lanes on each side, plus a footway and a cycleway. Yeah. And did you know that the cycleway was reinforced sufficiently that if the bridge ever became busy enough that it could be converted to either a hard shoulder or a running line. Yeah.
Could you imagine the madness of that? It's such a quiet bridge at some point and then has 3 lanes, which would be our only 3-lane major bridge. There wasn't Kingston, I suppose, even Queensferry and Forth or 2.
Exactly. The bridge deck itself is basically 30 metres wide, give or take a bit. It varies a bit across the length.
Right, okay. Yeah.
And it's supported by, as I said, a single central cable over which each 125-foot mast, which is a lot in metres, I should have calculated that, and anchored in the median, so in the central reserve. Each cable is over 700 feet long and comprises 24 strands of 3 inches diameter. So it's not just one single cable, it's a row of 6 wide by 4 high, anchored at various points, clamped together, and they go up and over the tower and come down and are anchored within the box girder below.
Yeah.
Okay. And that provides additional support.
Kind of hoisted up. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So the box girder itself, it's a steel box girder. It's continuous across the entire length of the bridge. Most people probably don't realise it's hollow. There are walkways through the inside of the bridge. And it was actually fabricated from 80 individual sections that were welded together on site. So done some research, and we found that the steelwork actually was made by Colville's in the Glasgow area. Now, what I don't know yet, I'm still doing some research on this, is trying to figure out which Colville's it is. Now, at that point, it could have been Ravenscraig, it could have been Gartcosh, it could have been Clyde Bridge, it could be any of those
locally
plants.
sourced.
Yeah, locally sourced steel. But then, interestingly, they then shipped it down to Chepstow in Wales, which was for the yard for Fairfield Maybe, the main contractor. Okay, who then built these 80 boxes, these small boxes, and then shipped them back up to Erskine by road, where they were then anchored into position, levered into position and welded up.
Yeah, because it was like a train, the way that they done it. Yeah. I mean, I've seen in the brochure, and it's got a great graphic in the brochure of them doing this.
Yes, exactly. So there is a good graphic in the brochure, as you see, showing that. And we're going to be sharing some graphics on social media and on the website as well that actually illustrates the process of how the box girder basically spread out from both sides of the river, gradually, progressively, until it met in the middle and got jacked off.
You've got to think about, it's difficult when you're speaking on a podcast without the visual aid, but if people think of it, it's like you're building up a vertebrae.
Yeah.
Of these component sections that are coming together, and then there's a doorway between them, and it's hollow, and you can go through it. Yeah.
So the other key component of the design, and moving away from the main bridge itself, was the approach roads, because you can't just build the bridge and then nothing can get to it. So they had to incorporate it into the existing and planned road network.
Which, of course, brings us to things like Bishopton Bypass Stage 1, which was really, in a lot of ways, the first part of the approach roads to the Erskine Bridge. So that was like M898.
Now, did you know there were some alternatives considered here? So I'll give you some detail on this. So at the time the bridge was initially being looked at and being designed, they weren't 100% sure on what the Bishopton bypass was going to look like.
Yeah, okay? Well, I know that much, but I haven't seen any plans or for different junctions and so.
Right. So let me cover the north approach first, because that's the easiest. So the A82 north of the bridge, that was already a dual carriageway. That had been upgraded to dual carriageway. We think in the 1930s. We've not quite ever ironed out a date for that, but it was certainly dual carriageway by that point, although it was on a fairly substandard alignment by even 1960 standards, so they knew they had to upgrade that. So they were going to build free flow links from the bridge to the A82 with some connections to Old Kilpatrick. So that was fine, nice and easy, okay? South of the river was a bit more complicated. So there was a plan for a new alternative road to the old A8. So the A8 was the main trunk road between Glasgow and Greenock at that time, okay? Yep. Now, there was some uncertainty about whether that far west a new section of road was justified. Do we really need a motorway? Do we really need a dual carriageway? So they actually had a proposal where, rather than the Craigton interchange that we've ended up with,
which is M8 Junction 30,
yep, there was a proposal where the approach road would have continued straight on and met the A8 just east of Bishopton.
Yeah.
Okay. That was considered to be the worst case scenario. So that if they decide, or they weren't sure what was going to be happening with the motorway system,
say the motorway went off down where the A737 went, or something like that,
they would still have been able to connect to the main trunk road on the south side of the river, which was the A8. But as it happens, by 1968-69, by the time they were actually moving forward to the construction stage, all of that had been ironed out, and we knew that the M8 was going to be motorway.
The Renfrew bypass had already pushed itself up towards Bishopton at that stage at a temporary terminus, and it was almost a given then.
So by but by like 1966, they were more or less certain that there was going to be a new dual carriageway, and then by the time the motorway was actually under construction as Renfrew bypass, we've discussed before, they actually decided to upgrade that section from St James out to Bishopton to motorway.
Coming with a little point here, I think it actually ties in very well with what they've gone, and I'm quite glad they didn't go with some kind of almost a bit what ended up south of Forth, where it was all a bit of a horrible temporary arrangement.
Sort of botch,
a bit of a botch, and then you had the A9000 and the M9 Spur, and
it never worked. Never worked.
We've got a much better southern approach set up at Erskine.
Yeah, absolutely, and it does work quite well. Now, so basically what they did was they decided, well, hang on, we need to link the bridge to the motorway system. So we had Renfrew bypass completed to that point to Greenock Road on the A8. So they decided, well, hang on, let's make rather than just have a single Bishopton bypass, let's split it into two stages. Stage 1, a mile long, connecting from the end of the existing Renfrew bypass to the south end of the bridge. We'll incorporate that within the construction contract.
And there was a junction in there, a local access junction at the toll plaza, wasn't there?
That's right. Yeah.
So people could jump off.
Yeah, so there was a junction with the A726,
which
at that time was still a major route that was taking traffic to the ferry. as well. So that was a fairly important route. And the toll plaza, as you say, was incorporated in. It was always the case that Erskine was going to be a toll bridge. Any major crossing that was being designed or planned in Britain at that time was going to be a toll crossing, because it was a way of recouping the money that was required for the enormous cost of the design and construction.
Yeah, and for its maintenance as well.
Crucially,
because bridges are expensive to maintain. Yeah,
exactly. So it was always going to be a toll bridge, and we'll talk a wee bit more about tolls later on. Okay, so let's see what other facts and figures we have here for you. Yeah, I'm looking through the booklet here because there are so many things and I don't want to miss anything in particular. Yeah, so they decided for the construction, rather than have one mega contract, they decided to split it into 4 to make it more manageable, make it easier for...
So some for the roads, some for the founds and piers.
So contract 1 was for the piers and foundations, and that was the one that was designed by Fairhurst. Okay, that eventually was awarded to Christiani Shand Limited, who actually built the M74 Hamilton Bypass Stage 1.
Okay. I'd heard the name before.
And the value of that contract was £720,000.
Oh, that's really cheap. Yeah, things were cheaper back then, but of course, what that equates to now
equates to about $13.5 million, I think, when I ran the calculation recently for that. So that was contract 1. Contract 2 was for the bridge superstructure. So the main bridge itself, all the steelwork, the towers, the cable, the box girders, all the various bits and bobs that come with that, the bridge deck, the surfacing and the like. And that was let to Fairfield Maybe, as I mentioned earlier. They were the main contractor on that. The value of that at that time was $4.5 million. And I do have a calculation to hand on what that is. I'll need to look that out so that we can see that, but I think it works out.
We get a chance to pull it up later, and I'm looking at some of these
things.
It's
like something like 50 something million. Contract 3 was for the North Approach roads. Okay,
so that was what you were just talking about, the A2 and Dalnotter.
Dalnotter interchange. Did you know the name Dalnotter comes from the name of the burn that runs through the site?
There's me thinking it was just the cemetery. Some reason or because it was always
it's a Dalnotter burn, which was placed in culvert as part of the contract, a 500 feet long culvert.
There's when people think of it's just a little contract for this little junction. No, you've got to put something in culvert. You've got to divert all the services, adjust the existing road, landscape the whole area. As some people know that interchange, in fairness, as that's Old Kilpatrick interchange, but no, it's Dalnotter. Although sadly, in where I work, that's not the term I hear people call that junction. To be honest with you,
yeah. And it was I've seen Mount Blow referred to as well, even though it's
Mount Blow is the other junction as you go in towards Clydebank. But anyway, look, we could talk about roads all day, but we're talking about bridges today.
Yes, we are. And I've got you talking there has got my figures up. So the 4.5 million Fairfield Maybe contract actually works out to £84 million today. So there you go. The third contract, North Approaches, as we said, Peter Linden Company Limited were the contractor there. And this was the scheme that our old friend Barry Old worked on. Barry was an engineer on that scheme. People may remember us mentioning Barry's name before. He worked on Renfrew Bypass, Irvine Newtown, the extension of Glasgow Airport Runway. Well, Barry was still in Glasgow at that time and he worked on the North Approaches and he's got fond
memories of that. He had the wonderful foresight to take some great photos. He was doing these things which are... So
some of the wonderful photos we've shared were taken by Barry at the time. Really great that these guys thought about taking photos at the time.
Especially early on. A lot of his photos show these things really at the beginning stages of construction as well. But yeah. Exactly.
That contract, incidentally, was valued at 1.4 million.
Okay.
Which today would be about 26 million, give or take. So, yeah, it's fair for a junction of that size. It was only tying onto the end of the bridge. There was some...
It's three-leveled, though.
It's three-level, you're right.
It's semi-directional. It's pretty big as far as these junctions go.
Yeah, I mean the contract included the construction of the slip roads, the realignment of the A82 dual carriageway, and the alteration of the local road system. 6 bridges were constructed, as well as 2 service culverts and that 500 metre long culvert of the Dalnotter burn. I said 500 feet, 500 metres. That was also built. So yeah, fairly large project. That contract was awarded in December of 1967 and work actually started in January of 1968. Actually, that was the second thing to start because construction on the foundations and piers had begun in April 1967 with a formal ceremony on the 6th of June of that year.
Good
and
stuff.
Final contract, which was the second largest, was for the southern approaches.
I was just about to say.
Southern approaches, but also the administration building and the toll plaza.
Yeah, so the toll plaza's the toll plaza. Some people remember that, but the administration building is still there.
Still there.
It's part of the depot now.
Yep.
That is still used for maintaining the bridge.
Yep. So the admin building was to be the home for the toll staff, the maintenance staff. There was workshops as well to allow the guys to do work. They had their own fire tender. They had their own breakdown truck. They had their own road sweeper. They had their own maintenance vehicles. They had all
just
this
like
at the time.
even just like Clyde Tunnel.
It had to be a self-sufficient operation. Yeah, because there was nothing else like it at that time.
Yeah.
So they had their own setup. That contract, which included the M898, which for a while was the shortest motorway in Britain and remains the highest numbered. That was included, as well as that mile-long extension of the M8 or Bishopton Bypass Stage 1.
Yeah.
These sections, the M8 and the M898, opened in advance of the bridge. They were completed on the 27th of December 1970.
That's right. So basically you got 6 months where you could use this Bishopton Bypass, but you just couldn't get onto the bridge yet. It was
That's right. Yeah, that's right. The value of that contract was 2.6 million, which is roughly 48 million today. And that was constructed by our old friends, Watlings Civil Engineering Limited.
Absolutely.
Watlings got everywhere.
They did.
Yeah.
A contractor of the time.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So as I said, construction kicked off in the spring of 1967, and construction proceeded pretty quickly considering the scale of the bridge, and obviously we're celebrating the anniversary, so it was formally opened on the 2nd of July 1971 by Princess Anne. She came up and there was a whole load of dignitaries. The Secretary of State for Scotland, Gordon Campbell, was there at that time, and various others, and basically, construction mostly went without any major hitches from what we're told, from what we're led to believe. By 1969, the piers and foundations were complete and steelwork erection began. The vast majority of the steelwork was in place by the end of 1970, with only the closing sections of the main span completed in early 1971. That was followed by the mastic road surfacing, the services, the warning signs, the phones, the CCTV. They had cameras before any other parts of the network. Clyde Tunnel had it, I suppose, and other safety features that were installed. All went very well.
Yeah.
There were some issues with steelwork. It was found that some of the box girder designs that had been used elsewhere perhaps needed a bit of strengthening, and Erskine did get a bit of strengthening done on it. So after it was complete, there was a few years of work that was done internally with no real disruption to traffic. Now, I've got a story for you. It was from one of our followers.
It's not bedtime yet, is it?
Yeah, I know. It's always great when people get in touch. This is one of the things that's so rewarding about what we do on social media and other places, because people get in touch, people who have direct experience of being involved, okay, and we're celebrating the anniversary and the opening, and it was wonderful when we got a message on Facebook from Lynn Lingwood, okay, and she sent a message to say, I was a waitress on the day the bridge opened, which also happened to be my 17th birthday.
Oh, cool.
I served in the posh marquee with a lovely level floor. Then in the workers' marquee, which was tarpaulin over rough ground, it was like the rocky road to Dublin. Okay, so I had actually I emailed Lynn back and said, that's fantastic. You know, was that a big event? Because it's quite hard to tell from the photos.
Yeah.
And even speaking to Barry and others, you know, what kind of scale? You know, when Forth Road Bridge opened, it was a huge event. Kingston was the same, thousands of people. Well, Lynn assures us, yes, it was a big event. Princess Anne was with all the senior members of the design and construction team, also local politicians as well, and a number of others from the local area, you know, had turned up. She says here, it's good, the marquee for the toffs had a lovely wooden floor, posh tables and chairs around the marquee, and posh bits and pieces were served with glasses of bubbly. The Princess Marquee guests weren't eating or drinking much, so I went next door into the workers' marquee. What a difference. The tarpaulin placed over the rough ground, so I couldn't really see where I was walking carrying my tray. The difference with the atmosphere was there, much more fun.
Okay.
Sandwiches instead of canapes and cheaper plonk, but loads more fun than next door. The senior waitress sneaked me a glass of bubbly at the end as Mum didn't want me drinking on my 17th.
Oh, well,
so,
there you
Lynn,
go.
Thank you very much. It just humanises the whole thing.
It does. It actually puts you in there in the atmosphere of it, because you're right, Stuart. You look at these old photos and it's just this kind of grey, kind of like, it's always raining at an opening ceremony. They've got this bunting of this kind of stand, and it only just shows, you know, somebody opening the road. What happened to this? Why don't we do this anymore? I mean, loads of roads have opened now. There's not that much fanfare. I suppose we've let people walk and cycle on the roads before they open. That's kind of cool. Yeah. But no, they're not really big events anymore, to be honest with you. But I guess it was just a product of the time. You know, this was all seen as awfully clever.
So new, so big, so modern, and looking to the future.
Overexposed to it now.
Exactly. So I think when Princess Anne came, she came across in the ferry, because obviously the ferry service was coming to an end, and it was operated by the Clyde Port Authority. So the old ferry there was the same as the one operated at Govan, and it ran through, the blue colour with the names on the side in big white letters.
I know the ones, yeah.
Yeah, so I think the service basically ceased on the day that the bridge opened for obvious reasons. So I think what happened was Princess Anne came across the ferry on the Land Rover and was then driven in a car from the ferry terminal down below up across the toll plaza to the big setup they had next to the admin building for the opening. There was a podium there and basically a grandstand with people sitting in it. They invited guests. There was a bit of talk, chat going on, people doing speeches and the like, and then the ribbon was cut and she then did a drive over of the bridge, and it was open to traffic the afternoon, after. So by the evening of Friday the 2nd of July, it was open. And you know what? That was actually worked out quite well, because that's the start of the Scottish holiday season, start of July. So I imagine that summer season was far easier for traffic heading north than
about this new bridge. You can just get straight up to Loch Lomond now and all these kind of things now. It's fantastic.
Yeah. So the construction of the bridge was quite phenomenal. And some people have said that, they remember it seeing this massive bridge spanning out across the river from both sides. And, the precision the engineers and the team involved must have had was unbelievable. No computers to work it out. So they're launching these girders from both sides of the river, and I think it was within inches of where it ultimately needed to be when they met in the middle. So when they eventually got to the middle, they had to jack it up ever so slightly before they could weld it all together. It was so precise. It's a lost art, John.
It is.
It really is.
I suppose computers have taken over and everything is like that. But,
and they had some temporary cables and things in place at the same time. So in terms of the toll plaza, people are interested in the toll plaza because it's 15 years now since the tolls were removed.
Yeah.
So it's quite a while since they've gone. So people are a bit interested in it. So there were 4 toll booths for each direction.
So the toll plaza obviously only on the south side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was realised pretty quickly. Originally they were going to charge variable tolls depending on what was using it, but they decided on a flat rate of 15 pence. For all vehicles, from cars and above, motorcycles and other, invalid carriages as they were at the time, they were able to use the bridge for free. So we had this charge of 15 pence for the few years. But not quite sure on the records, tried to do a bit of research there, not quite found out, but it looks as though it probably was raised to about 30 pence during the 1980s, and eventually it was moved to 60 pence in 1992, and it stayed at that level until they were abolished in 2006.
Was it always 60? It never went above 60, did it?
No, it was never higher than 60 pence. But bear in mind, you did pay both ways.
Yeah.
Which, although the Forth Road Bridge had that originally, it was swapped eventually. So you only paid double.
Only northbound.
Yeah. So, it was all new. It was all fresh. Did you know there's a service tunnel runs below the toll plaza?
Yes, I have. I've never been in it, to be honest with you, but I have seen the wonderful pictures because we shared them on social media.
Yeah.
And that service side is not just for slinging cables and ducts through, as many of these things often are.
Yep.
That originally was an access to get into the booths, wasn't
it? Not so much the booths themselves on foot, but it was an access for the cables and the equipment and the like that went through.
Was there not a case where you get into parts of the central reservation or other areas?
What the tunnel allowed was for the staff members to get across the dual carriageway without having to cross the road.
Right.
And there was a bus stop there as well. So any staff coming in from the Dumbarton side,
they could safely cross the road without having to. There's another hidden road here, right, that not many people realise. As you spoke about that admin building we spoke about, so there is a service road that goes round as well.
Again, to allow the vehicles going into the admin building to very safely get across to the other side, or
just crazy.
There. Yeah. So we spoke earlier about the junction there with A726. What's the name of that junction?
So originally, if you look at the opening booklets, it's just known as Toll Plaza Interchange. It's very, very dry, but it came to be known as, particularly in where I work, as Spectacles Interchange, and that is really just from the way it looks. It looks like a pair of glasses. Now there's some interesting things I've heard about this, and some people have said that it's actually the junction was deliberately modelled after to look like an owl.
Yeah,
because of Erskine has got some connection with an owl, so it's got a made to look. But you wouldn't make a junction look like that.
I did some research on that, and Patrick, our graphic guy who's helped us with the brochure and things, he did a bit of research as well. We couldn't find anything at all.
It's just one of these local legends.
Lots of people have said that. It would be interesting. So either the logo was based on the junction, or the junction was based on the owl and the logo. So we don't know which came first, or So
I think it's very boring. Right, it's like that. because it's what's known as a folded dumbbell, and you put the slips together because it's ideal for something like tolls.
Yeah.
Because you've got the people leaving and joining almost at a similar spot, so everybody's caught, if you know what I mean. And it doesn't use much space, the junction, in fairness, I got to say, I love those roundabouts underneath. They're lovely sight lines. You get through them quite quickly. It's a junction I enjoy, to be honest. It used to be 2 lanes, didn't it? You could almost on the slip.
That's right.
It was all a bit, a bit narrow, but it was changed. So that administration building's interesting. That's still there.
Yep.
And another thing is Shilton Lane. Shilton Lane, if you come off south of the bridge, and as if you're going towards Bishopton, there are a lot of houses that you see there on the left. Now, I've always wondered if these were built there as part to house the workers for the bridge. That
was workers' housing.
And they're still there to this day, these houses. So if you stay on Shilton Lane in one of these houses...
So toll operators, maintenance workers, were all given houses. That was very common at the time. Great idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's like with distilleries, they have like the distillers' houses next to the cottages because people used to live where they worked. Yeah, that's unheard of now.
Yeah, it's a great idea, but we've got away from that. Maybe when we move back to this local living that seems to be creeping in to the agenda after the pandemic, that sort of thing may well come back. People not commuting 30 miles to work, just live next door to work.
But I like living on my car-dependent estate and driving 45 miles to...
Yes. I know you do.
Industrial estate,
I know you do.
No.
Okay. Okay. What other interesting facts and figures did I have? Well, there were some wonderful artists' impressions.
Oh, okay.
And they're on the website, and go on and have a look at those. They're in the brochure as well. Fantastic artist impressions that almost look like just paintings of what's actually been built. They're so lifelike.
It's good to always see these. I think it's quite because it's so slender. It's something too hard to make it define bold and impressive on art's impression. However, I have seen an image of a mock-up of what the Erskine crossing would be like. Yeah. And this was almost like a railway bridge that looked like it was an iron cast thing.
They considered tied arch as an option. They also considered a steel truss.
Yeah, so that was it. The steel truss idea, I seen that some of these things, but I don't have the pictures of them.
Yeah, it's in one of the technical papers that we have in the archive, and basically it was ruled out because they couldn't achieve the span that they needed to enable shipping to continue upstream.
So one thing, if we're to go off and kind of talk a little bit about why they chose a bridge, why did they not choose a tunnel? Have you seen anything in your research, Stuart, that maybe examined the options of a tunnel?
John, when you think about it, a tunnel would not have been a viable option because of the topography, because there's steep slopes on either side coming down to the river, and if you were having to come down off of the hill, see where the M8 is now, think how deep you would have to go down under the river, then think of the gradient coming up again.
You'd have to completely realign the 82, and
it would have been hugely expensive.
And at that point, they didn't have the preformed sections you sink to the bottom, which is what they do now with a lot of these estuary crossings. But no, so that I suppose answers, because we've had questions coming about it. So
exactly.
So let's start back to where we are. We've spoken about everything. The bridge is open.
Yes.
The ribbon's been cut, and traffic starts using it. They're paying their toll.
Hundreds of vehicles turn up over that first weekend when it's operational. Wonderful. We've got pictures showing cars parked in lane 1 with people jumping over the barrier, having a look to see the views upstream, downstream. Traffic chaos. Everybody's loving it, paying the tolls. And then when the interest is done, it starts to taper off a bit.
Well, which brings me to an article that I've come across while doing research on the bridge, and this was years ago. I'm talking about 7 years ago, and it was in the Sunday Post. And this article is dated from November the 7th.
Okay.
So 1971. So that's about 5 months after the bridge is now open, and the headline reads "Erskine Bridge, a white elephant."
Oh. Okay.
Which is a term I think we know a little bit. Sometimes we'll talk about because that's what we heard people say this, but based back then. I mean, we don't think of it like that now. But I'll read some of the article in the Sunday Post if you're happy with that. It says the controlling councils, Renfrew and Dumbarton, are to sponsor 2 major surveys to establish what use is being made of the 9 million Erskine Bridge, which opened in, well, it says in this article it's June, but it's actually
It was July, so the
July.
journalist was wrong right away because it was a £10.5 million construction and it opened in July.
What can we do? Sunday Post, goodness me. Anyway, I will continue despite the errors. It says which opens in July. Okay, traffic has been far lower than expected.
Yeah.
So with the, this is kind of tying in that narrative of initially some excitement and then so it's very quiet. Yeah. So they're wondering why. It's believed drivers and commercial firms are avoiding the bridge because of the tolls. Mm-hmm. They're saying. So yesterday, a Sunday Post man surveyed the bridge for an hour. So
I'm sure he was an expert as well.
Yeah. So the journalist turned traffic engineer went out there with his counter. Only 4 of the 6 toll booths were open. The collectors were not hard pressed by the traffic flow. Between 3 and 4 p.m., 352 vehicles used the bridge. 6 a minute. The Forth Road Bridge averages 20. Nearly all were private cars.
That's like comparing apples with oranges, comparing the Erskine Bridge with the Forth Road Bridge. You just can't do
different
that.
Sort of crossing, I know. Yeah. And also, of course, Forth being open for longer at that point as well. Only 1 bus and 2 lorries used the bridge. 3 motorcycles and a horse box made up the total. He carries on saying surveys the toll cash is supposedly to defray the cost of construction, yet it could be costing more to collect than it brings in. Dr. James McFarlane is mentioned here. Okay,
yep. Mm-hmm.
Chairman of the Erskine Joint Committee said they had authorised the surveys to help them decide whether there was a case to demand further discussions with the Scottish office about the abolition of tolls. Okay. So look at this. They've got the bridge open. James McFarlane's obviously looking, going, well, maybe we should get rid of these things because back then it was seen as low utilisation. This is a failure. One will be a traffic study about the starting points and destinations of vehicles using the bridge and of the vehicles using alternative routes to avoid the bridge, tying in with what you've said about the tunnel.
So that's a key point, right? So we have to put ourselves, and we always say this, put yourself in the time.
In the thinking of the time.
In the thinking of the time, in the context of the time. Okay. So if you were a driver and it was 1971 and you were going across the Clyde, the roads were much quieter. In the space of 8 years, we had 3 high-quality river crossings completed. Clyde Tunnel, 63-64. Kingston Bridge in 1970, and then the Erskine Bridge in 1971. We had gone from having no good alternative viable crossings of the Clyde downstream of the city centre to 3. Traffic growth was, on the up, but the capacity of the Clyde Tunnel and the Kingston Bridge were huge because they were designed for 30 years down the line. Erskine likewise was built to have a lot of inbuilt capacity.
Of course.
Okay? Yeah. So if you've got quieter roads elsewhere, but Erskine's charging a toll, it's not a surprise to realise that people are going to
go through the tunnel.
Yeah. So you could say, was it a bad idea to have tolls in Erskine?
Here's another thing. This is something I've just realised. I'm glancing behind you, Stuart, at the map. If you look at how joined up the network was, so that bridge opened in 1971.
Yep.
The Renfrew motorway wasn't open.
That's right, yeah.
So it's actually, you've got, the Renfrew bypass was open. Yeah. You couldn't actually easily get across because there was still that big gap in the system that we had to wait till 1976. So actually, connectivity-wise to a wider strategic road network is pretty poor.
Yeah.
And then tolls.
Exactly. So as you say, so if you're coming along the M8 from Edinburgh,
Yeah.
And you know that you're going to get kicked off at Kingston and then need to join the A8 and crawl along Paisley Road West and all these other areas to get to the Renfrew bypass at Hillington. Mm-hmm. Whereas you can come off either at Great Western Road or use the Clydeside Expressway, nip up Crewe Road and along that way. Yeah, the traffic almost isn't being positioned to use the Erskine Bridge at that time. And the completion of the Renfrew motorway in 1976 obviously had a huge effect because you were then putting that final piece of the motorway puzzle in place.
People just went, great, we can stay on the M8 now and go all the way through.
And go all the way along. And
that's an interesting thing to
think
about.
And no doubt traffic started to recover beyond that point. Now, I know through some of the research we've done that we know that they made at least 72 million in toll revenue in the years that it was operational, that it was collected. Yeah. So that 72 million is obviously way in excess of the 10.5 it cost to build. And even when you include the inflation to that time in the 2000s.
It paid for itself, really.
It more or less
and it paid obviously for that maintenance and get people there and stuff like that.
So, it suffered a bit in its early years because of the tolls. But as the Clyde Tunnel started to fill up and started to get busy, more people would start to consider the Erskine as a viable alternative. But, has to be said, even at the time the tolls were removed, it was only just getting 30,000 vehicles a day.
I think it always had the stigma as well with the tolls. People used to think, oh, you know what, it's a pain. We have to have change on me. You know, it's just, oh, for goodness sake, the Women Bridge. Yeah.
At that time, it was only getting about half the flows of the Clyde Tunnel and about a quarter of the flows of the Kingston Bridge.
Yeah, well, the Kingston has 10 lanes, I suppose. Yeah. But there you go. But what's the kind of contemporary position now? Are we finding the Erskine Bridge is actually really quite busy now?
Yeah,
has it recovered?
Yeah, so tolls were abolished in 2006, and within the first year, traffic had increased by 25%. So we're now in a position where more than 40,000 vehicles a day are using the Erskine Bridge.
Which is within the kind of design capacity for that type of road. And I know we might think, oh, you know, it should be 80. Oh, great. Another traffic jam there. Yeah. You know, we don't want that. This is fine. This is good.
It's busy now.
It's busy enough.
Far busier than it ever used to be. If you're driving on a busy summer weekend or whatever, chances are if you're in lane 1 because you want to go north on the 82, you're probably in a slow-moving convoy going across the bridge.
Yeah, that being said, I mean, I never got caught up with too much. It seems to function pretty well, unless there's an incident or something like that. But no.
Yeah. Speaking of incidents,
oh no,
there is one huge incident that we can't talk about Erskine Bridge without mentioning. The big incident.
Okay. I think I know what it is, to be honest with you.
So did you know that on the 4th of August, 1996, a 6,500 ton oil rig being towed downstream from one of the shipyards on its way to the North Sea collided with the Erskine Bridge?
I did know this.
Yep.
I did
and
know
it
this.
tore a hole 10 metres long by 30 centimetres wide in that hollow steel box girder. And not only that, but the incident coincided with an Oasis concert at Loch Lomond. And there was thousands of people trying to get there, and the bridge had to close because of the serious nature of the incident.
Well, of course. But don't worry, Clyde Tunnel to the rescue. You know, so
by that time, Clyde Tunnel was having work done in it to fireproof it, and Kingston Bridge had multiple restrictions on it because of the strengthening work.
Yeah.
So it was chaos for a while.
It was a total traffic nightmare. This answer, by the way, we are going to do questions.
Yeah.
And Hugh Templeton did have a question: as how much damage did the 1996 collision cause?
Yeah, so we'll answer Hugh's question now. So sure. It caused serious damage.
Okay.
And we know one of the engineers who was first on the scene, and they were rather taken aback by the extent of the damage that had been caused to the bridge, and it was immediately closed to all traffic and pedestrians and cyclists. And that remained the case for at least a couple of weeks. We're open to pedestrians again first when they managed to do some urgent repairs, and it then opened to traffic, cars and light vehicles by the end of the August, but it didn't actually fully reopen to heavy goods vehicles until December. And they had to basically undertake £3.6 million worth of repairs. And they reckon they lost several £100,000 worth of toll revenue as well. Now, they were later reimbursed for that cost by the insurer of the oil rig company. Yeah. It turned out that the tides and the times and various things hadn't quite worked out in the height of the oil rig, and there was a bit of a miscalculation.
And it was sitting a bit higher than
it was just a bit higher, so that it scored the underside of the bridge. We've seen stories of people, who worked as toll operators, and one woman said that her car had been buffeted almost from lane 1 to lane 2 as the oil rig hit and was scraping under, because obviously the bridge is fairly flexible because of the nature of its taking.
It's a good thing it was flexible, by the way. It could take that, because otherwise it could be a lot worse.
So she got a bit of a dunt there, yeah. Thankfully, in those days they had the tolls, so they were able to close the bridge pretty easily. It was pretty easy to close it from the south side.
No,
we've been told another story by people who were involved in the maintenance at that time. By this stage, Strathclyde Regional Council maintained it. We should have said it. I always like to mention who maintained it. So initially, Dunbartonshire and Renfrewshire through the Joint Committee, and then when they were abolished in 1975, Strathclyde Regional Council maintained it on behalf of the Scottish Office, and then when Strathclyde was abolished, it actually fell to Renfrewshire Council to look after as part of the Clyde Local Authority Consortium, who were looking after the trunk road network at that time.
For at least a few years anyway, until it was into the operator's hands.
So we know they stuck up some goalposts at the end of the bridge to check the height of the vehicles that were actually looking to use it, and if someone was too high, they were told, no, sorry, you're too heavy, you can't use it, and were turned away. That went on for a while.
Now it's replaced by the weigh in motion system, isn't it?
Yeah, it's got a weigh in motion system now as well, so they can record the weights of vehicles using the bridge. If you're found to be higher than 44 tons, I think it takes a photo of you and you get a fine.
Pretty clever system. People think they're speed cameras, don't they? Those things there, but they're not. They're weigh in motion thing. But yeah, be very careful if you're in an HGV. Double check.
Yeah, exactly. You know? So to round off the sort of history then of the bridge, so after the oil rig hit, there was a lot of repairs done in the early 90s. The bridge deck was refurbished. It was re-waterproofed and resurfaced. That was done. And then after all the major repairs and things like that, through the 2000s and into 2010s, there was a lot of focus on the access equipment. So there was new inspection gantries installed, new access manholes, through the side of the web of the bridge. That was all done. There's been various other surface and repairs. The parapets have been replaced. The vehicle barrier system has been upgraded as well. That's quite
a recent one. That happened, I think, 5 years ago.
There or thereabouts,
these big H4A things they put in.
I believe the cables were painted, and at the moment they're actually working on a project to paint the box girder, and that will happen over a number of summers. So I think this is summer number 2, and I think it's scheduled for completion 24, 25, I think, for that. The bridge will be fully resurfaced within the next 3-4 years as well. That's something else that's been worked on.
Good.
And there's been new navigation lights, new electrical systems, new lighting columns, new high mast lights, new signage, various other things have been done as well. And there is still a lot of programmed work coming up as well. The bridge is still very important, so we'll get a lot of work on it. And there's been more than £50 million actually spent so far by Transport Scotland and the Scottish Office before to keep the bridge going.
Working. Yeah. No.
It's a fantastic structure. It's pretty unique. It's certainly unique in Scotland. It's the only one of its type. I mean, there's various types of cable-stayed bridges. You get the monocable, you get harps. And fan types, I think Queensferry, Harp is like Kessock, so you've got that. So the only monocabled stay bridge in Scotland is Erskine. There's not many of them at all, and that fact was recognised by Historic Environment Scotland back in 2018 when they actually categorised it as a Category A structure, classified as Category A, so that's of national importance. That's how unique it is. There's just so many things about it that are unique and technically, aesthetically, architecturally.
This is not the Stuart Baird I knew.
No,
you really have come to love this bridge through the research and things. Not that you didn't research it before, but I mean in the detail that you've looked at, and I totally agree with you. Some of the views you can get up from up here are fantastic as well.
It's absolutely stunning. And we estimated recently that we think more than 400 million vehicles have used the bridge since it was completed.
Oh, okay.
So that's a fair number. Anyway, time's going on, so we really should
better get into the questions, which I'll throw away. You've answered one in the course of this, so we put it out to social media, and some people come back to us with questions. We've got it's the regulars here, Stuart. So you're ready for these?
Okay.
This is on Twitter, and it's Robert Kilcoyne.
All right, we know Robert.
At Robert Kilcoyne too, and Robert asks, has there been a significant increase on the traffic on the Erskine Bridge since the removal of the tolls, the M74 completion to the MA, and the Pulpit Rock improvements which have made the M74, M8, A898, A82 a shorter and quicker route into the Highlands than the M73, M80, M9, 84, AE, 85 routes? Circuitous, but I get that. What do you think about that?
Yes, it has. The traffic's up more than 30% than it was before the tolls.
You think that's about the old plug effect where it removes a gap? So
I think so. I think so. Yeah. I mean, traffic's gone up anyway, but I think taking the tolls off has made a big difference. And in that first year, actually, there was a bit of a drop in the Clyde Tunnel traffic. There was a noticeable drop in Clyde Tunnel traffic. So yeah, it definitely had an effect.
Okay, that answers that. Thanks for that, Robert. Okay, the next one, Stuart Armstrong. Hello again, Stuart. He asked, maybe a question for the podcast if you've not already recorded. Well, here we are. Any truth that the towers were only needed as temporary supports during construction? The bridge could actually function pretty well without them, he asks. So we're talking about the two masts, two towers.
Erskine was always going to have masts, as they refer to them in the technical paper. The design always had towers. There are other box girder bridges like Cledow in Wales. It's a box girder that doesn't have towers. No, Erskine was always going to have towers. I think some of the detail of them changed as the design progressed, but they were always going to be there.
It's interesting an opinion like that forms. Is it maybe because they're quite slender and quite short compared to something like Queensferry?
Possibly. We know the original design, the towers were going to be hollow and have lifts and access chambers like the Forth Road Bridge has, but as they beefed up the design and strengthened it a bit, the towers were actually filled with concrete.
Well, there you go. Thank you for that, Stuart.
No problem.
So we're going to move on to Facebook now. So Gary Davidson has a question.
Mm-hmm.
Gary asks, what's going on with the West Side cycle lane and footpath? The gas pipeline work was completed at least a year ago, yet it's still all shut up.
Okay, I've consulted with our friends at Amy, who maintain the bridge now on behalf of Transport Scotland, and they've confirmed that the closures are required for the painting of the bridge that's ongoing, as well as works that are happening to the edge cantilever beams and the access hatches and all that sort of thing. So there is still maintenance ongoing. Bear in mind you can't really see it because it's all happening below bridge. If you go down underneath and you have a look up, no doubt you'll see some of the work that's going on. But yeah, that's the reason for that.
Okay.
So we're told.
Okay. Sorry for the inconvenience, but there you go. We've got Jim Gifford who asks a question. Are they ever going to resurface the cycle lanes or the road? Now, you did touch on this. This is coming up in the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, it was done in the 1990s, and there's a programme in place to do it.
It's not your standard asphalt. A lot of people ask about this. It's that kind of...
it's difficult to deal with.
Yeah, you've got that. It's that mastic polymer stuff, and it's very expensive. It either comes in really big batches or not at all, kind of thing. So it's a very difficult thing to repair.
You can't just go out and chuck any old stuff into the hole like you do with potholes and things.
Yeah, or even still sawing right into it. It's
into the steel deck. Yeah,
it's a nightmare, Jim. Take my word for it. It's a nightmare. Okay, so you've already answered Hughes Templeton. We've got one more question, just overleaf here on the back, and this is from planner_Scott. Was this quite controversial at the time, he says, particularly destroying parts of the village and the loss of passing trade for those crossing the river? Now, when he says the village, I think he might mean Old Kilpatrick.
He also uses the D word, which is, that's... We don't like when people use the destroy word.
Oh, destroying.
It's a very emotive, very negative term to use. The bridge didn't destroy anything.
Enhanced. Is that what you mean?
Yes. We enhanced our road system. But looking at Old Kilpatrick, I don't think anything was demolished for the bridge.
Well, I mean, one of the things is I find very striking about the bridge is piers are going through, like, it is in the village. It's going over, and it's like a roof over the village in some sections. Yeah. To me, I think it's cool. And I look and I think, that's really impressive. They've bridged over the whole village. But imagine maybe at the time, just put off thinking in the time, people thought, wow, this is going to be a change.
Yeah, but I don't think they thought it was a bad change because these are the people who had to depend on the ferry service that had been very unreliable. So I think most people actually embraced the bridge with open arms. And based on the responses we've seen in social media the last few weeks talking about it, it seems to be a particularly loved bridge. We've had a lot of comments from people on both sides of the river who seem to have a real regard for it and love it almost. It's their landmark.
Of course. I mean, it's more loved than Kingston, I'm just saying.
Yeah, You're right. It is by a long way.
But I think maybe if you had the ferry down at Old Kilpatrick, people stop there and get something to eat, an ice cream and a coffee. And of course, those things dried up, maybe. Yeah. But the same thing happened in Rosyth and all these other places, South Queensferry. So. It's
just the nature of it. But as society moves on and things develop, then ultimately it has to be done. But it's a very aesthetic. It's a lovely design. It's very elegant, actually, you could say.
It is.
And it fits very well. And that's why Hess gave it category A listing. Yeah. Because it fits so well with surroundings. It fits so nicely in that valley on both sides of the river. But from the distance, it's not dominating the landscape. It adds to it in a way. It's a feature. It's an icon. It's a 20th century icon.
Yeah.
It's a design icon. It's a civil engineering marvel.
Absolutely. It's the other great bridge, as I always think of. I have a picture of it.
And you know what? I think it's nice that it's getting some attention for its 50th.
So, no, that's good. I've just got one question myself, just to you, Stuart.
Yeah.
Have you ever been in Erskine?
Yes.
You've been in the box?
Yes, I have.
Erskine?
Yeah, I have indeed.
There you go.
I've been in twice, a few years apart. I've never been up the tower because that doesn't happen too often. Specialist guys go up in the cradle when they're doing that.
Of course, because it's external.
So that gets done not too often. Been in the admin building a few times. Never been in the toll tunnel. I was personally responsible for the removal of the sign gantry on the southbound M898 a few years ago as part of various enhancement works that were going on around there. So
that's right. And you built a fence.
On a bit of fence around the compound, that green fence.
Stuart's fence, yeah.
So yeah, I've had one or two involvement.
Well, I've been up Forth and Queensferry Crossing, both of them. So there you go.
And of course, we did our landward appearance on BBC One.
We did.
Out there with Dougie Vipond, as you mentioned at the beginning. That was enjoyable. Dougie Vipond's a huge fan of the Erskine Bridge. Yeah. He might listen to this. Yeah, he does follow us on social media. So
hello, Dougie.
Yeah, if you do. One final fact from me.
Go for it.
Of the original 7 warning signs that were installed on the bridge, only 1 remains. And it's on the A82 westbound, just west of the Mount Below junction, and just before you go off to join the bridge. And you will see the old warning sign. It's not even a VMS sign, that's how old it is. And it's got 4 messages: slow traffic, ice warning, fog, an accident, I think.
That ancient
and
thing.
It's still there.
Well, that has to be...
And I recommend, if you like your old signage and you want to see it, there's a footway there, go and walk up and have a look at it.
Of this, because we'll have to get that removed.
No, you just leave that well alone.
I'm only teasing.
And the 2 original telephone boxes at either side.
That's right, they're protected as well, aren't they? They're lovely. I'd love to see them brought up, but no, they're brilliant.
Yeah. So it has a rich history.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. Yeah. There's a lot to talk about. Okay, it's turning 50, but you can almost go back a century to get to the beginnings of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a great discussion here today, Stuart. And of course, in 50 years' time, we'll celebrate the 100th anniversary of this. So we'll have another podcast out then.
Yep, I'll be 88 and you'll be like 96. So,
so that would be good. We're going to have to do that. Do you remember that podcast we done? Yeah. I know.
So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting, yeah. But listen, anyway, I've really enjoyed this one. It's good to do these special features now and again. I hope everyone enjoys it. Let us know your feedback. Leave us reviews.
Yep.
Please enjoy all the various features we've got lined up for the 50th. Thanks to Transport Scotland for some of the information in the photos that they've supplied as well. We must thank them. And and remember, pick up a booklet and a badge.
Yeah.
You're not just getting something wonderful to keep and read and wear with pride. You're also supporting the Glasgow Motorway Archive in the process.
You are.
Allowing us to do
the
much
envy
more
of all your
things.
friends with things like this. So no, check it out on the website and on the store.
Yeah.
So.
And of course, all our podcast episodes can be heard online, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you find them. Leave us a review. It's always good to hear from people who listen. Gets us spreading the word as well. Our listener figures are higher than ever. So thank you everyone who keeps listening to us.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, check us out on social media. We're there on Twitter, we're there on Facebook, and even Instagram as well. And there's going to be loads of noise about Erskine for the next while. So do that.
Absolutely. And we will be back next month with a regular podcast, and we hope to see you then.
Yes. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, John.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye for now.